Transgression, that was the very first word that I had to add to my dictionary when I was starting with my PhD studies back in 2011. And I thought, where else would you ever use this word? What is the meaning? What is the connotation? Coming from the same world as David a minute ago, from the perspective of a classical musician, everything about metal at first seems alien and transgressive, but of course you seldom match the word and the connotation at first glance. So I'm again happy to share with you the journey. First of all, why am I here? These are the many hats that I have to wear for my professional life. I did study almost a big myriad about music, but my focus would be especially on pedagogy. That's what my PhD thesis is about the pedagogy of metal, why and how people pick up metal instruments and try to learn. There is just no institution to really guide them. There are very few examples around the world. There's Metal Factor, for example, in the Netherlands, but can we really put its institutional approach on par with a very established classical music institution? I would actually really love to discuss that. And there are, of course, other places, other sources of information like Berkeley Online and everything that you can learn metal in a schooled sense, but it is the language of the autodidact, which is seldom transcribed. That was what my study was about. And from there, of course, you watch an entire subculture unfold around you, and you become a protagonist, as you see me and my red battle axe on the stage. That's a really transgressive instrument that I love to brandish around. And besides that, I also have a career as a software developer. Right now, I've established my own company and developing a software product on teaching music theory, music literacy, especially to kids, but also adults. So that's in the fledgling phase yet. I've just released the front end. So maybe the findings about my PhD thesis about how music illiterate actually most metal musicians are, and what would a music literate person do, would be the rest of my life's focus. So at this point, it's a nexus for me personally. So about actually what I'm going to talk about, this is first-hand experience. So this is maybe unlike many scholars whose opinion is based on sort of third-party narratives. It's a very seldom encountered figure to have someone who's really actually been on the stage, at the backstage, interacting with the musicians as a peer rather than as an observer. So this sort of emic perspective is unique to maybe a few figures in the metal researchers community. That's how I happened to be known by many people. It was actually pure luck, and it was my love for symphonic metal that first brought me here. But actually, I couldn't get my music to sound much like symphonic metal. I just don't have the voice for it. So this is actually a picture from like 10 years ago. This is the first promo picture for my album release in 2013. And this is from this year, 2024. We're still on stage with the same people. The drummer has changed. I don't have a picture of him at this moment. And this is an entire different crew from 2015. Just want to give a snippet about why I'm complaining that my music doesn't really sound like symphonic metal. This is just a very synthy intro, just a loop.
Fulya,
Yeah.
we have problem with sound. I don't know how others, but we in Czechia don't hear sound.
Why didn't anyone say before? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
we can hear it, but
Problem.
in bad quality only.
Yeah, that's quality.
Okay. So I'm proceeding. Sorry, I thought it would be the same as Zoom and it would be transmitted quite well. Anyways, maybe I should have checked the settings and everything. Sorry about that. If anybody is interested, I can share the YouTube video. All the point I wanted to make is that this is rightfully something out of tune with what most of the symphonic metal audience would like. Most of the criticism was that I just don't have a voice. Everybody was talking about that. I was the composer, basically. So it is really transgressive to be in the role of a composer plus an instrumentalist for metal. And plus, I was also dabbling in production. That was even a bigger sin. So metal's visual and sonic identity still doesn't want to see women except in the Beauty and the Beast role, perhaps somewhere at the front of the band, but never at the back. So description of metal is still like white male centered. We think of a hypothetical metal band and we imagine something like Gojira, for example. I don't say they look bad, but they look really male. And actually the perception of a female musician is usually centered about like somebody that should stay at the back or the front, somebody that shouldn't be in the picture or should be in the picture as sort of a color element at the front. So of course, women's presence in metal is guaranteed by some subgenres. We today can't imagine really much of a symphonic metal band which is male fronted. I mean, even the say to say something like a male fronted band is bizarre, and you have to really emphasize the female fronted genres. I find it really jarring, actually, and we really discussed about this with the society, the Metal Research Society. Um, we hope there will be a change, but we don't predict it in the near future. The female fronted adjective is there to stay, but we do have some women creeping in, which is really fortunate. I had the pleasure of, for example, talking to both Cradle of Filth keyboardists, Marie Fedorov and Zoe. Um, they do come from a perspective to say that their musicianship uh, really guaranteed them as like keyboardists in Cradle of Filth. But is it really coincidence that the band picks female keyboardists? So that question was unanswered through my interviews. Let's explore a little bit further. Actually, I've written on this subject. If there are female protagonists in terms of instrumentalists of metal, they are pushed into sort of alien roles. Obviously, operatic vocals or vocals otherwise are where women are tolerated. But if there is something else, if there is another female player, she can, okay, be the keyboardist. Metal and keyboards are a long story. In most scholarly volumes, the presence of keyboards are barely creeping in, but actually they've been around since 1980s, late 1980s. And it's weird that we have so little written about them, so few real technical details, even in the work of Jan Herbst, who writes so much about metal keyboards. That's also one of my aims. Maybe we could elucidate more about this matter. And I would still argue there are very able female people, female guitar players around, people who would really you would look as um, a figure, a role model for especially younger girls. But why don't we really have someone who is in the magnitude of Steve Vai or Yngwie Malmsteen? That's Is it maybe because of the glass ceiling, or could we just say women, while they perceive the glass ceiling, don't even try? Where is really the fine line is driven, we will have to explore. So the male gaze, of course, is a factor. No matter what you do, if you want to participate in performance of metal and you are on the stage, and you can't be just pushed aside as sort of a groupie role or she's with the band sort of idiom, then you will be gazed upon either with like fervent admiration or with outright misogyny. I had the chance to experience both actually, and I can't say it's always pleasant. Even the admiration, because it's because of the perception of the audience that defines your role or your ability on the stage. Stuart Hall has a very good theory from the early 80s about this. It's encoding, decoding. So you, as a female protagonist, might not want to encode yourself as I'm there because I'm a female. You don't have such an intention. You're there as an able musician, as a composer, as a mastermind of music, but the audience would still want to put you in the shoes of someone being there because they're female, still being there because they look this way and that, they make them recall this or that figure, but never in your own right as a musician or as a producer. So that was my experience, and I had the chance to compare notes with Jasmine Shadrach, and she reports a similar experience, and that was a bit disappointing for me because you see, I'm coming from a country which obviously islands metal, let aside women in metal, and she comes from Britain at the hub of things where metal evolved. I thought her experience would be different about this, but no, we could have written mot a mot the same things. And when I found out about this in 2015, I was a bit appalled, and we're still of course corresponding about how things changed after a decade. So, what are those barriers that I was talking about? Well, these are figures from Sharp and Becker's, which was published in 2017. And the equality has maybe improved maybe by 1 to 2%. So in total, only like 3 to 4% of metal musicians are women. This is very striking a graphic, and in order to double check, in order to make sure that my statement after like 7 years and after the post-pandemic changes in music industry still hold true, I took a close look at the lineups of both Hellfest this year and some other festivals around Europe. But Hellfest, I really investigating, I really scrutinized the ratio doesn't seem changed. But if you look at really the people who attend the festival, the gender ratio is not as blatantly unequal as it was in the early 2000s or even 1980s. Then the audience itself was also more masculine, more composed much more of men. And the tokenism in women in audience now evolved into tokenism of women on stage, and the audience is almost like 60% to 40%. I don't have an official declaration from the organizers of the festival. This is just observation, so it might just not be true. But as of this year, this ratio of 4% of metal musicians hasn't changed. And this might even be more visible, more blatant in terms of when one talks about production side or the management side of things. Um, a week ago, I was actually with the metal band Symphony X. I was the person to pick them up from the airport, correspond with their tour manager, and I accompanied the band in the 2.5 days they spent in Turkey. And they were of course quite happy to talk to me about their experiences, and I was happy to talk about my work and how I admire their music, so on and so forth. And while I was talking to the tour manager, I was complaining, there are some guys from the backline company whom they weren't really cooperating with a person from the crew, from a Symphony X crew, who was also a female. And I was saying, oh, look, it's this case again. And the guy was confirming me, the tour manager. He was saying it's because she's a woman, not because she's not saying correct things. So he has also seen it. And it's a sorry thing, sad thing to see that this resistance is there to stay. Well, conclusions and future directions. Actually, I am observing a change. I'm perceiving as a woman, especially in the later years, during experiences such as live concerts and everything. That idea about if you are not with the band, then you're an anomaly. You're not supposed to be there. Is changing, especially from fellow musicians. I'm experiencing far less misogynism and outright more support. This doesn't mean that they are treating me as just another fellow male band member, but I've actually never experienced it with people who personally know me, but from the protagonists' eyes of other bands, other audience members and everything, what I often perceive is that you would either have an exaggerated sort of chivalry or a sort of disdain, and this is now finding sort of a middle ground. When for example they see me dragging keyboards, they're usually heavy gear, as you know, and a keyboard's fate never changes. You just carry heavy burden, heavy gear on stage. So when you are seen with a huge keyboard case on wheels, people do flock in to help, and maybe a little bit more readily than they would a male keyboard player. But still, that idea about this exotic element in the band also is there to be perceived. So I'm hoping that with more and more female participants in especially production of metal, the gender ratio will assert itself, maybe not in the near future, I would say, but in maybe 50, 60 years, if it will be that long lived. Okay, this is outright more pessimistic, but people are now much more aware of this problem, and women are making a case, they're making a stand. Sometimes maybe feminism is evoking too much of a perspective, too much of a resistance from the male participants point of view, but it's no wonder that they understand this case, this plight of females, part of being part of either the audience or the production or the performance of metal. And it's a rumbling but a present respect that I observed that I didn't observe 10 years ago, these later times. So this is all my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to questions. Thank you.